How about now? Hello, 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 test. Hello?
There's a delay.
Oh, there's a delay.
I think delay is probably fine as long as there's audio. Well, I think there's supposed to be delay, I think that's just the nature of it. I just can't, I'm not getting because they need to keep us out.
Oh, that was a big delay. That was a huge delay. Okay. Yes. Well, we're gonna start. Okay, so thank you for being here. This is my favorite moment in life. I love Sip and Chat. We started during the pandemic virtually. We started as a small group of art leaders and art administrators to try to vent and decide what's going to happen during lockdown. We had no idea what was going to happen. It started as a small group, and I ended up hosting every Thursday from 4 to 5, rain or shine. The only day I didn't host Sip and Chat was during the rally, the Black Lives Matter rally, that actually the mayor's office called me to cancel Sip and Chat because they wanted everyone to participate. So here we are. It's the first time we're doing a hybrid event. I have no idea if this is working. I hope it is. And apologies for any logistic issues. As we learn and grow and move into this new environment, I learned about different techniques that we could do, including like sharing some learning experiences here. There is this owl camera that you can buy for $1,000, and you place the camera right here and you broadcast everyone. So hopefully I'm going to be able to make that commitment, and I'm talking with other organizations and other galleries in the area, and maybe we can buy and use together as a community, even Boston Sculpture Gallery. So today we have again another amazing guest speakers, and Sip and Chat is very informal. We don't have to prepare anything. I ask my guests not to prepare anything, just speak from their own day-to-day experience. This is all about us sharing our challenges, our accomplishments, and how we can improve our sector. It is a very small sector. I witness that every day. People come here every day, and when I introduce them to each other, they realize that they either met each other or heard of each other or know of each other. So we have to be very good to all of us, to each one of us, because it's a small sector and we depend on each other. So TAG is a membership gallery, and it's actually the New England Art Center, not only a gallery. And this is part of the New England Art Center initiative. So I figured that creating a gallery space, it's not enough to raise your visibility as an artist and to offer opportunities for emerging arts administrators to get to know the sector. So by doing events, renting the space for visitors who never heard of the SOA area, it helps me to raise your visibility as an artist. So that is the whole idea behind having this space. So this Sip and Chat is focused on fiber art. I remember Jody Colella and Meryl Como, who have pieces in this exhibition right now. During the pandemic, they were talking about creating an event of such dimension, and here we are, and it's happening all over Boston, all over greater Boston, which is great. I have only seen incredible demonstrations of talented artists and people really involved and interested in continuing to expand fiber art. There is a lot of different conversations about fiber art now. There has been a boom, right? It's growing. The question is it going to stay? So historically, and you know, of course, much better than me, there was a research in the 60s. And now I feel that we're back. Fiber art is back. The question again is, how do we make this into not just a pop-up, a momentum? This show right here that we have at TAG is by far one of the most powerful exhibitions that I've seen actually in any gallery space. We also have a show across the hall with mass art founders of the teachers and founders of the fiber art department. The depth, the techniques, the attention to every single detail is incredible, and I think it's very particular of fiber artists. So let's talk about a little bit about your practices, what have you been doing, your thoughts about fiber art in general, recommendations, accomplishments, challenges, requests. Share your stories. I am not going to introduce yourself because you know how to introduce yourself better than I can introduce you. So please just go ahead. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Claudia. My name is Anna Christina Goranson, and I'm a fiber artist, mainly, curator, and sometime teacher. My background was originally in furniture making, and I still love furniture, but I felt it kind of held me back. I really think fibers is the best. What I love about fiber is that it can evolve as you are working. When I was making furniture, it was very much, you make these drawings and then you make the thing and the thing looks just like your drawings. And I thought, well, that's no fun. What's the point? Like nothing changed. So I went back to grad school for fibers and thinking I would be doing more dyeing, or I wasn't really sure, but the first week or so, I did a one evening workshop with felting. And once I realized I could make three-dimensional form with this lightweight, fluffy material, and it could still hold structure and be dyed gorgeous colors, I just changed everything I was doing. And for the last however many years, 17 years or so, I've been doing mostly felted work. And I'm going to disagree a little bit. I agree that fibers may not have been, at the top of the art scene, but what I love about fibers is that it's always here, and it has always been historically, like going way, way back. And it may not always be appreciated, but it's always there, always. So I love that part of fibers and textiles as well. What else? I definitely use most of the fibers techniques to make sculptural forms. But again, kind of what I love is that you can do that. It doesn't have to be flat. It doesn't have to be clothing. It really can be anything. So I love that. And I've been a member of the Boston Sculptors Gallery for about a year and a half. And just to plug my own show, I have my solo show right now.
That's the purpose of it.
Excellent. I have my solo show right now at the Boston Sculptors Gallery. And I have a piece over there as well. And for me, that's been a really good experience to be part of that gallery. And I do find myself in a little bit of I'm thinking about kind of changing a little bit. What I want to do with my life. So I'm looking for a job. Anybody's got a job. I have some specific ideas, but just in general, I think I would like.
This is a chair. This is actually a chair.
you sure?
Yes.
Okay.
yes.
I was not gonna interrupt.
No,
Sit on
go ahead, go
somebody's
ahead.
functional fibers.
The balls are also chairs, and there's chairs in the closet.
Okay. Sorry to interrupt.
So have you always been into fiber?
Well, I think, so within my family, my grandmother was an incredible weaver, and my mom wove, and knitters, but they oddly would never have considered themselves artists, right? It was just what they did. Incredible textiles that they were just like, oh yeah, that's what we do. But I was always very interested, and I think I originally grew up in Sweden, and I think there, even elementary education, we were doing woodworking and textiles in like first, second, third grade, and I still have like a textile thing I made back then. So I think it's always been there. Yeah, always.
Well, I've witnessed Christina teaching felt making, and it's just absolutely magic. It's
It is
incredible.
magic.
People who never touched any type of materials like that and had no idea that they can actually make felt in today's world, making from scratch. And also there is a piece here, and yesterday I had visitors coming into the gallery, and they were talking, they didn't know I was listening, but they were talking, and they were commenting on the similarity of work between her work at Boston Sculpture Gallery and this piece. They didn't know that it was the same artist. And it was interesting how we ended up talking about techniques, and I showed them images of how you make this. They had no idea. People have no idea how it's made, and it's just incredible with the same techniques from centuries ago.
Yeah,
Right?
oh yeah,
Centuries ago.
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, very, very old technique, and that's also, I think with felt making especially, it's just so simple. It's really, it's so simple. All you need some wool and some water.
Yeah, it's a workout.
So, yeah. I don't know. And
So when your show is on
Oh, yeah.
until Sunday,
next Sunday, so next Friday, I'll be at the gallery from 5 to 8:30, that's on May 2nd, and then May 4th is the official last day of that show.
and it's all new pieces.
All new work and not all felted.
Oh, yeah, I did see that. There's some 2D pieces.
Yeah. The thing with felting is that it is hard on your body, and my body hasn't been super happy about the felting lately, so, yeah.
I think it's easy to be an artist. Well, thank you. We'll go back to
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
topics, but Rachel?
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Oswald. I'm the administrator for the art ed department at Mass Art, and I also graduated from Mass Art through art education and fibers. Fibers has always been a thing for me too. I think one of my main entry points was friendship bracelets. Home ec was kind of out of the picture of schools by the time I was in school, but I would have enjoyed it. And it's stayed with me as I've grown up as sort of the lens I view the world through, and I keep finding new ways that that's true. Every culture has textiles, every person wears textiles, and we use them functionally and aesthetically, and then as I learn more about history. During COVID, I kind of went down a history wormhole while crocheting, and it's a representation of a culture's values, aesthetically and physically and materially. When I was a student, I mostly did tapestry weaving and embroidery, but I love all kinds of weird multimedia combinations. This year I was exploring rust printing, and got into a really kind of frenzied laboratory experimental phase. And I was able to show those pieces recently at the Piano Craft Gallery at Jeffrey's show that was themed around the orange line and fiber art. And so I also got into like gelatin image transfers and combining those with the rust prints, and so that's like my most recent material exploration. I'm really committed to my tiny sketchbooks. They're always with me. And so like, what's it? I do love color. Yeah, color is kind of like, you know, one of my first languages, I would say, and it's also part of how I view the world and interpret it.
So what is your position at MassArt again?
I'm an administrator for the art education department.
And how do you see the institutional support to the fiber art?
Well, I don't know exactly because it's a different department. You know, I was lucky to exist in both departments as a student. Working in art ed is a little bit separate across the campus, but it's so interesting to see that the students are still working with the same like concepts and materials and ideas that I saw myself and my peers going through at the same time. And you know, those threads kind of carry through so much of, you know, the things I think about and, you know, the things I see represented on the walls here too.
Because I see a lot of students, they come here and they are interested in fiber arts, but more related to design, to fashion, more related to the aesthetic portion of it, not the making, not the fabric. I did host a mass art group here. They were juniors. Heidi, she teaches there. She has a class here. I was impressed with the depth of their testimonies. They were the assignments. They had to pick one piece and talk about it on the spot, and I was in heaven. It was great. But I still saw that aspect, that Project Runway frame of mind, right? They want to make, it's more about the design than the making the fabric. So I always wonder how this is going to develop. You know, when I go to art fairs, I went to Art Basel in Miami, it was all about fiber. Art Basel in Basel last year, all about fiber. There were gigantic installations. You know, that Japanese artist who draw with strings, Kiaru, I forgot her name, Kiaru Shioda.
Yeah.
She had gigantic, monstrosity of installation made with art, fiber only, and even here in this show, every piece carries a very, very deep message. So I was happy to see how those students who were, I think, fiber artists, fiber art majors, were already engaged in this thought process. So Janet, from academic perspective, you've been teaching for so long. How do you see this generation development in terms of engagement with fiber art?
Hi everyone, I'm Janet Kawada. And I am a fiber artist and a mixed media sculptor. So for the longest time, and I will answer your question, I considered myself a fiber artist. And kind of what is a fiber artist? Well, my grandmother taught me to knit and crochet and tat and sew and do all those things. And to me, the ability to wrap yourself in something, the touch and the texture was the most important thing. And I went on to be a professional quilt maker for about 10 years. And then in my 30s decided I needed to go back to art school to learn more formal education. And I ended up in the fibers department in the late 80s. And
What school?
at Mass Art, where I stayed for 30 years. So I was a student there, and I was the studio manager, and then I taught there for over 25 years. And what I came to realize is fibers is a word. It's a word. So the fibers department is not a textile department in MassArt, although they teach the process. They teach weaving and surface design and dyeing and silk screening and gelatin printing. And I have two former students here. And paper making and sculpture, assemblage, collage. I'm trying to think of everything I've taught. And cross-cultural fibers. And the fibers department in MassArt does not sit in design, which is 2D. It sits in 3D, along with sculpture, metals, wood, ceramics, jewelry making, and glass. So the whole exposure that you get is not just the process, it's the conceptual. It's not just, if somebody graduates from the fibers department, you can come out and make fashion. You can come out and make clothing. You could go into the textile industry, but you can also do community work. You can go on to make sculpture in felt. And I'm a process junkie, and I landed in felt after everything was said and done, because I like the process of not only making something, but being able to touch it while I make it. It's that sense of touch that was important to me and is important to me. At the same time, I still call myself a fiber artist because I think it's really important, but it is not the only material that I use. I use a lot of different materials, and it's not, my conceptual work goes much farther than that, and I am one of the curators from the show across the hall, as well as having some pieces there. So Marilyn Pappas, who's honored next door, was my teacher. And the legacy that you see comes from the Bauhaus, those people who came over to the United States. And not only Annie Albers, who wove, but everybody else who moved, spread across the United States, filtered into the art departments, and then took those processes and materials and went with them. So I look at the breadth of work here and the breadth of work that was in the Orange Line show, and it is all fibers, but it doesn't mean that it only used thread or it only used yarn. It's the way you use the material.
Yeah, we have works here. There are photographs.
Yeah, there are stitched pieces. There are Hannes's pieces which are hanging, and she's using natural materials not only in the linen that she uses, but in the hair that she uses. And I would say probably fiber artists are collectors, right?
Yeah.
We collect. You whether it's thread from the loom that you can't
Found
throw out,
objects here,
right,
beach Converse
or
here.
you've got, right, or you've got paper over there, or you've got material here, or copper, right, or you're crocheting with film, but it's a way of taking that, and fiber artists are flexible, and they don't. And they beat. So if you're a paper maker, you have to beat your pulp. If you're a sculptor, you're manipulating your materials so that they can be flexible and yet rigid at the same time. So you have to have that. And if you're, yes, my VHS sculpture here made out of VHS film. From, all those DVD, there's VCR tapes that you don't do anymore, you can't throw away, yes.
This is a real memorabilia piece,
Yeah.
right?
So these are memories.
memories.
This is my kids' performances that, what do you do with it? They can't see it anymore, you don't want to throw it. But the thing is that it's the way you combine things, the way you think about things. What's going on in the world now that talks about, that you talk about with your material, how you can say something about what's going on using a material that people look at and go, oh yeah, I know what that is. I understand that. I have a visceral moment. And it could be through language, like we see here, or it could be something as esoteric as this, you know. So yes, we die reflexible. Did I answer your question?
And many more that I didn't even ask.
But yeah, I've been a fiber artist all my life, and I hope I continue on.
So do you all identify yourselves as fiber artists?
So wait, I have one more thing to say before you answer that. So almost 10 years ago, I curated a show at LaSalle College called Is This Something? And the artists that were in it all did the type of, they weren't all fiber artists, but they all did the type of work that wasn't in the museum, okay? Because we all used materials that were different. It wasn't stone, it wasn't marble. It was the beginning of Samantha Field's building of her collaborations with all their stuff. And we're gonna have a 10th anniversary review of that show coming up in 2026 or 27. So 10 years later, is this still something? Because that's one of the questions that I get all the time when I look at my material, when I use my material in different ways. It's like, what is this? Is this something? Yes, it is. It is something, and it's important.
I think historically, fiber art has always been associated with political causes, right? We had the
Contemporary fiber art. So, if you think of the guilds, you think of the and maybe I should actually take a step back on that. So you had the young women who were doing the cross stitch as they were growing up in colonial America.
Right.
And even before that in Europe, So was that political content? But certainly from the 60s on, fiber arts were political, for sure.
Yeah, we had the HIV quilt.
Oh, we
had
before that.
the pussy hats. We had
Even
Ai Weiwei did the masks during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So it has always been associated with political causes.
But before that, you had guilds who made tapestries. You have the Bayou Tapestry, which tells a story because there was no photography. So either you had to paint a picture or they did these enormous tapestries that were like the size of that wall. So, and that was, you learned from the guild, you went. And so fiber arts has always been there. But as contemporary in the 20th century, as artists came up, and you want or Picasso suddenly said, I want a tapestry, or William Kentridge, right? In this day and age, who says, I want a tapestry. And so in South Africa, there are women weaving his tapestries. So that has always been there. And of course, everybody is wearing a fabric. So felting is the oldest fiber arts in the world, because all you had to do was tamp that wool down. You didn't need a loom, you didn't need a needle, you just wet it and rubbed it. And so
when I went to Ireland, I learned that it was a technique mainly done by males.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And then today we associate with genders. We don't associate with males necessarily, but it was originally made by males.
Yeah. So textiles have always been there, and even for all you people, and I actually don't see anybody here wearing fleece, but fleece is just
it's warm. It's warm today.
Fleece is just spun.
Finally.
It's spun Coca-Cola bottles, soda bottles. That's all. But it's still. I didn't know that. That's why it's so warm, because you're wearing plastic.
Ooh.
Okay. But they had to spin out that fiber. And just one more little tidbit is that silk is actually one of the strongest fibers there is.
It's like this chair that you're sitting, the artist, he's a rock climber, and this is actually plastic, right? The ropes are plastic.
That's all I have to say.
Oh, no, you have a lot more to say. Don't even think about it. So Jeffrey, are you a fiber artist?
Well, my name's Jeffrey Nolan, and I guess it's kind of elemental and maybe a little corny, but it would say like a maker, that happens to have an affinity for fibers. So I say I've been working with fibers for a very long time, probably starting back when I was a child, and my mom is an artist, and she also worked with textiles, and that she would make us costumes, and she would make her own scrubs for when she went to the hospital, and she would do cross stitch constantly while she was waiting for us at like our extracurricular activities. So it was always around, and her sisters also worked with fibers, and so I would take a lot of those scraps and I would start making doll clothes with them essentially. And then she taught me how to use a sewing machine. So that was always kind of a way in which I could get my hands on something to make something. I love objects, and I love sort of that construction and process too. And so I think I returned to fibers after I finished undergraduate studies at Boston University, where I currently teach. And I started just making these fabric collages because I got tired of painting, because I was doing painting and sculpture at the time. And it was only like a couple of years, I guess, after the big Whitney show of the Geese Bend quilts that come out.
Yeah.
So I had like really supportive faculty say, hey, Jeffrey, like you should look at these. Like they have this like incredibly contemporary sort of painting aesthetic, this abstract quality to them, but they're made with fibers, and they're particularly made with fibers that have been saved from being just discarded out of a want for materials, really. So I think that just kind of led me down this place of sort of understanding what fibers could be beyond the just, everyday clothing, like the everyday function that they presented at the time, and that they could be the sort of shortcut for me to use as a color form, or even more with like the very kind of raw way I was creating seams as a sculptural form. So I kept on with that, and I was making these fabric collages for a couple of years, and then I wound up at Mass Art for graduate school, and sort of like was working with soft forms, like a lot of polyfill, and I'd always kept on using like upcycled clothing. I felt really compelled to use, this stuff that would just be discarded otherwise. And I know there are like questions about, what is the history of this fabric? Where did it come from? And I think that's just as a tangent, one of the most impressive things about fibers is that there is a history to them, whether it is the textile, whether it is the raw fiber itself, whether it's the synthetic fiber. Like there are all of these hands that touch it. There's all these implications about where it came from and eventually where it might end up. So when I was in graduate school, I kind of found I hit a slump. Like I wasn't sure I wanted to keep making these soft forms by just sewing them together, and I had stopped making the fabric collages so much. And thankfully, I took a semester off and then came back and started late in a sculptural weaving class, which was led by Natalie Liebach.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Recipes?
yes,
Next door?
yes. I really cannot sort of emphasize how grateful I was for all of those things to come together, because it really changed the trajectory of what I did in school and just opened up all of these new paths to how I could create form, how I could work still with color, because I am a faithful colorist, I guess, in that sense, having a painting background and just seeing how those, the surface and pattern of fibers and these old textiles can come together to make something completely new. All the while still speaking to that sort of associated context of, oh, I know what that is. So sort of echoing what Janet was saying, that we can recognize sort of, I think just innately, oh, I have a connection to this because I've, been wearing something like this, or I know that fiber, I know the feel of it just about every day of my life. So, and it's all around me. It's not like my clothes, it's my backpack, my handbag, my sheets, so I think that the sculptural weaving, and in particular, I use a lot of coiling, which is, you're using a strand essentially to coil a core of some material, and then you're connecting those coils through various types of stitches. But you can make these, incredible organic forms, and I make a lot of my own core material, so there's a process to it, ripping things down into strands and then sitting and coiling that for a long time. So I have something that is both solid but pliable enough to work with, and then finally putting those together with a coiling stitch. So it's long and laborious, but in that I find, this additional sort of layer of, and just going back to this concept of the political, let's say, I think again there's an inherent political quality to fibers just because of, it's switched, genders who have taken priority over making certain things in certain ways, tailors could be, men, they could be women, rope makers, you get industrialization, so you get all sorts of genders, and they become more anonymous than the individual you might have bought something, crafted with. So I think that I kind of lost my train of thought, sorry. I think that there is a political intent with the work that I'm doing, because it requires sort of stepping back, and it requires this marked period of time just to process, just to make, just to find. And I like to think that in a very small way, it is a way to, signal I'm not necessarily happy with the political situation, in that it's, we're super commodity based, right? Capitalism sort of dictates how we manage our time. You get up here at this time, you have this set amount of work, you eat at this time. And so when you can slow down and you can be like, no, I'm just gonna work at my own pace, I think it can be a special means for one, self protection, and you can sort of rejuvenate. But I think it's also just I'm choosing to do something that is sort of antithetical to the demands of the modern day. And I think, there's that sort of, maybe it's a nostalgia, but with fiber artists, they are continuing to use these long processes that have so much history attached to them, and much done the same way that they had been done. So I think there's something special about that, and I think there is something inherently political about that. Not to mention the widespread cultural context of fibers. Every society just about has been using fibers in some way or another. And then you get back to the reused fibers and what stories and histories those can hold.
I think it's nice how it comes back, right?
Yes.
The fabric comes back. naturally, with a different meaning. But you did mention the quilt, the G.
Geese bend, yeah.
And not a lot of people notice that Michelle Obama's portrait has a piece, a reference.
Yes.
Right? It is a reference directly from that community.
Right.
It's interesting. Again, how contemporary art brings back.
Yeah.
It's very subtle, but
Mhm.
very meaningful.
So, yeah, I mean, just
So
the
you
amount of community.
both were your students together?
No.
No.
Well, no, well, yeah, so,
We were at Mass Art at the same time.
yes.
And
I was Janet's TA
Right.
for, it was a course about what do you do after you're done with school.
but also I was an advisor for a
Yes.
semester.
So I think this is so incredible because we have two shows, two fiber arts back to back with legendary like Marilyn Papas and
And last
Janet
night,
Coada, Beverly Sky, who is watching us, also has pieces. And then there is a new generation, and then the newer generation, like the students who are here. So it's pretty intense, what's going on. And then we also have a mass art gallery. I mean, this is not about mass art. It's just like an example of how different generations continue the legacy of fiber, not necessarily improving because there's no such thing, but continuing to transform, right?
Right.
As you can see here, the amount of creativity, and there, like you said, there are all kinds of materials here, right? And while I was doing this open call, I had a lot of questions and emails from artists who would ask, I work with, like Amy, I work with weaving, basketry, can I apply? Right? Photography, the essence of the work is fiber, but it's a photograph. And, this is interesting how it evolves and you bring a completely different and fresh perspective from the same material.
Yeah, I hope so. And I mean, just before we move on, I wanted to introduce that special knowledge, I suppose, to my foundation sculpture class this semester. So I had a wrapping project. So looking at artists like Judith Scott or Julia Cousins, like using this very sort of open hand, but it's also precise. And the thinking behind it was how flexible fibers can be, but how strong it can also be too. So based on layering and based on the type of fiber you're using, like there are all of these points of connection that can really strengthen the bond between, assembled materials. They're using assembled materials. And I think it's just a way of thinking, again, that can really encourage like a problem solving. I know some people are much more sort of working at things straightforward, it's planned out, and I respect that, and there are many times within like a foundation course like that where you do have to plan out in advance. But then you can always go back and think about, what's the intuitive logic that I can use here that, like you said, you can build upon, you can see it sort of develop as it goes along, right? And I think that's a moment where imagination and curiosity comes in, and that is really, really critical, I think, is to maintain that sort of imagination and curiosity. So if you can work with like a material that offers that, it's, presto, it's great.
So Mia,
Yes.
what is your story?
Hi everyone. I'm Mia Rose. I am currently finishing up my last year at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. I'm actually going to do my master's at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago starting in the fall. So I'm really excited about that. I would consider myself to be a fiber artist, but I definitely also branch out a lot. I feel like I consider myself to be a transdisciplinary artist instead of like multi or interdisciplinary, just because I think that I try to transcend the boundaries of the materials that I engage with and the mediums that I kind of cross-pollinate between. And yeah, I grew up with my grandmas like making doilies, and one of my grandmas would like fix my baby blanket all the time, and I thought that it was so cool that she would just fix it all the time, and now it's just like a culmination of her fixing. It's great, but I always just was very interested in materiality and like, yeah, how to fix things in a way. And I went to a art middle school in Miami, where I'm from, art high school, you know, very basic art classes, and then I came to the SMFA, the museum school, and I began to work with a lot of printmaking. I made my entire like high school senior portfolio for colleges out of fibers, but I think I was a little scared to dive into it when I came to college. So I experimented a lot of other things, did a lot of printmaking, and then my second year here, I took a class with Sam Fields, and I was very happy that I did, because it just really got me excited to jump back into fibers. So yeah, and ever since then, I've been exploring quilting, more like contemporary crochet and puppetry and wearables, and how wearable sculptures can act as the extension of the self. And so yeah, I'm doing my thesis on puppetry. So yeah, I don't know. That's really all I got. My little spiel. But,
Well, it's too bad we cannot show your quilt. Maybe I'll bring the computer over there. So what was the inspiration for that piece? And if you can describe, because
yeah, so for those
cannot
of
see.
y'all who are not here in person, it's like a quilt that kind of comes onto the floor. It's very colorful. I also love color. Actually, it's a self-portrait, something that I've also dived back into. Recently, I had a very complicated relationship with self-portraiture. I think a lot of people have, and I feel like recently I've been more in tune with my mind and my body, that I've been able to bring myself back into the work that I make. And so, yeah, this was actually a response quilt to a painting that I did. That was part of a series of response quilts. I really was just experimenting with different materials. You know, materiality is very important to me. Kind of playing with environment, playing with objects, playing with narrative a lot. I'm a big fan of how fibers can tell stories. I actually am also a teacher at the MFA in Boston, and I taught the kids, because I teach weekend classes for 6 to 8 year olds. Or I did last session, and I taught them about the power of quilts and how quilts have so much power in telling stories. And so they loved it, and we made a big community quilt, and they all made their own little squares, and it was really, really wonderful. So yeah, I think that's yeah.
Does anyone have questions, comments?
It
Before we
seems
move
that
on?
grandmothers are the common denominators.
Grandmother.
It's certainly for
Grandmother.
me too. I mean, I never thought of myself as a fiber artist, but I see often I fall back on using fibers, which my grandmothers taught me to do. My mom hated anything textile, so she didn't want to do any of that. And but my grandmothers, they were like sources for all kinds of fiber.
Well, it makes sense that, you know, some women would very staunchly reject fiber work when for generations we were told, like, this is the thing you're supposed to do, the thing you have to do to sustain your household, it's your duty. It totally makes sense that, some people would be like, no, thank you. I want to comment on how I see like the more recent rise in popularity of fibers as kind of like an inverse response to society at large, increasingly relying on technology and it feeling more and more removed from our hands and generational knowledge, which I think is why grandmothers are so important in this, because they have picked up on the fact that these skills are so critical to survival, and that it's critical to give our young people these skills, and that because they know that it touches all of our lives. And so the fact that fiber is showing up in museums, and I'm on social media, I'm seeing like really trendy mending videos. Like these things are a response to society's shift, and also a response to the way that textiles have existed as an industry, and how it's our consumerism has developed into fast fashion, which is very rapidly choking the earth with all of its waste. And as soon as you learn about this, as soon as I learned about it, I started shifting the way that I buy clothes and what I do with them once I can't wear them anymore. I wove a bunch of rugs in college out of all my t-shirts, and they become these really dense, colorful mats of memories, but at the same time, something that is incredibly valuable to me. Like I can go to a thrift store and buy the same thing for $2 because someone else has thrown it away. And so these kind of waves of industry and the rapidly shifting value systems, I think play out in fibers because, and to comment on the inherent political nature, like I think it has to be because it touches life in so many ways, like the ways that materials are shipped around the world, like, that stuff is political. The working labor, the labor conditions that people are under while they're making things are political as well. And I'll just point to the fact that like it's a very broad umbrella, and I think we're all commenting in some ways on how there are so many ways to be a fiber artist and so many ways that it exists. So there is the runway fashion, there is the at-home mending, there is the craft kits at Michael's. Like there's room for all in a beautiful way.
I want to just add to that. I think that was well said very well. Fibers is a word. It's also a material, and it's also a verb. And I think in the art world, they want to focus on, they need that focus, but it's something that you use. And fibers, you paint on canvas, and canvas is a fiber, but nobody talks about it. They talk about the painting. So as the genre of fiber work, of fiber materials has infiltrated into every aspect of the art world, I think the art world is trying to figure out where they're going to put fiber work. But really, what is fiber work? Okay? We all use the material, whether you're quilting or coiling, or doing gelatin prints, or felting, or in my case, kind of doing a little bit of everything, and this. It's like, would you say this is fiber work? Would you say it's sculpture? Or, what would you say? Because this is a non-traditional material. When I graduated from Mass Art, from the fibers department, I was like, I'm gonna be a fiber artist. But as I've matured as an artist, I realized that I'm an artist. I am an artist. And I choose to use mainly fiber materials and fiber techniques. So, which is, whether it's sewing is a fiber technique, crocheting, quilting, paper making, stitching, it's all fiber techniques. It's the material you use. And it really has infiltrated the art world across the board, which I think is what you saw in Miami.
But also technology, right?
And then there's
Like
technology, so you can weave with a loom, or you can weave on your own, or you can.
I remember that.
But you can't make felt on. You can make felt on a machine. Actually, you can make a large piece of felt on a machine, but the other thing is, I consider myself a Luddite. When the electricity goes out, I'll be able to sew and do all those kind of things because I learned, because that's what fiber techniques are.
Yeah, if I get stuck at an island, I want to be stuck with fiber artists.
You could make
I will survive.
You could make tapa cloth and be fine, right? We all have that. Not only mentality, but conceptuality that goes along with that, because we understand the real basics of it.
Yeah, there is an engineering component to it. I think that, again, like as a sort of a problem solver, it offers a lot of different possibilities. I think that it's a link too to the past, like you say, that even though there are technologies that can produce, say, fibers in a mega capacity, there's still people making fibers in a traditional way or using them in a traditional way because it works, right? It works.
But there's also the opposite. There's also technology using weaving techniques, for example, to make body parts replacement. And also, remember piano, this
Felt on the
MIT lab, they made a portable piano with
Yes.
fiber,
Yeah.
right? Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
Using ancient techniques.
And looms are actually also the basis of the structure of computers in general. The binary system that weaving is done, with threads, either or, is the basis of binary code 0, 1. And so those structures are, like
Yeah.
They're linked. At the same time, there is no machine that can make a basket.
or
With
crochet, I understand.
Yeah, any basket you buy, no matter where you buy it, was made by hand. So when you go to Kmart or whatever, Kmart doesn't exist anymore, Walmart.
Now it's H-Mart.
H-Mart. That basket was made by hand. But even in medicine now, they're using fiber techniques to make, not sutures, but skin and, grafting, thank you, grafting. So fiber, the basis of the fiber techniques has infiltrated everything.
I mean, much like music is a universal language, we're just also familiar with the materiality of fiber, that it's like the first material that we come in contact with, and it's like the last material that we'll ever come in contact with. So it makes sense that all what you're saying pretty much is so just like music is the universal language, or a universal language, fibers can serve as that and can approach a lot of different topics and conversations in a much more community engaging manner, I guess. Yeah,
and the historical component is really how we learn about the past. I love opera, and every time I travel, I do the backstage tour of the main opera houses, and I love to go to the costume door. And although it's a topic for another conversation, how much money they actually spend on every single detail, because when we are in the audience, we can possibly understand, but they are so thorough. They research the leather, the piece, the hair, the laces, the gold, and they are very meticulous about how they're going to rebuild, and they have a whole team of scientists and conservation department because they want to reproduce what the clothing was at that time. Of course, not when it's a contemporary version. And I always go back and forth. I always think, oh, that's why tickets are so expensive and nobody can afford. But at the same time, I really appreciate the thought process and the knowledge that goes. There's a whole team of researchers. It's not just like, oh yeah, we'll copy and paste something. So it's the fiber and textile playing a huge part in educating the audience about how to be really legit about that specific time. Do you have a question?
I have a comment. This is going to throw a wrench in the discussion. I was very active in fiber arts in the 90s. I published a lot in that area. Jacqueline Larson would come to my openings and the old school people. And there was a lot of, discussion about what is fiber art, where does it belong, how is it contextualized, how does the history fit into it, and is this here to stay? And I'm hearing the same thing today.
Yeah.
And there is a whole, and the quintessential show in the 90s was the last Lausanne show, where there's Magdalena Abramovich felt suit, which was craft, and there was Joseph Boyd's felt suit that was art. It was clearly spelled out gender, and I had a heyday writing. And yet those things are all still here, and you're all still quietly defending the issues of fiber art.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, how long is this going to go on? It's gone on from the 60s. I did it for a while, then went on to other things. I'm hearing it again. It's like, when do we need to stop defending fiber art? What is going to be the point where, we can go through Lausanne, through Miami or Lausanne or wherever, and say, oh, there's fiber, of course, that's normal, and not say, oh, fiber is raising its head again.
I think it's similar to what they've been bringing up. I think it's because it's so ubiquitous. Going to what Mia said, it's the first thing, we're born, they wrap us in a blanket. When we die, they wrap us in a shroud or clothing or whatever. But it's also another thought that somebody had pointed that out. It's also there in our most vulnerable moments. It's also there in, whether we're being comforted after something, we're getting out of the shower or the bath, we wrap ourselves in a textile. We go to bed at night, there's a textile. We get up in the morning, we're putting textiles on. It's so ubiquitous that I think it has that sense of commonness. That means that it's always going to need to be defended. I think it's just
We don't
inherent.
have to defend photography
I don't think
anymore.
we have to.
We
but
don't have
I
to
think
defend
it will.
photography.
I think it's just the nature of the fact that, I agree with you. I think fiber art is art. I don't think it needs its own, fiber art is art. But I think outside the art world, because of that is why. That's my theory.
I think it's not fantastic that it actually is like way more fiber. I went to Mass Art in 11 to 15, and outside in the art world, wherever I was, I didn't see that much or hear that much talk about fiber. But these last years, it's been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And if anything, with people, I use all kinds of materials. Metal, stones, whatever I can get my hand on, I use. But I find that fiber is the one that people are more interested in and getting into shows more easy than any of the rest of them. So I find that I like it, and I think it goes, how long have we talked about painting is dead? Like, it isn't dead. There are lots of fantastic painters and painting, and I think it sort of goes along, and especially like you said, the kind of craft, if it's a female. I got that at Boston Sculpture Gallery. I came with these kind of vessels that was woven in metal. You could look through them. It was called needle ignorant. And one of the people there, that one of the heads said, well, you are making craft.
Yeah, well, I think that's,
I said,
I was gonna say that
are you for real? Do you mean this is
Yeah,
craft?
it's,
Who can use
the,
these for anything, these vessels?
yeah. We're still there. It's the same question. Is it art or craft? Which we went through that, right? And definitely textile and fiber is considered craft as opposed to decorative pieces. But then you see an exhibition like this and you go like, whoops, there's something there.
But it's not like it's craft. He's
Yeah.
classic knowledge at a high level.
Exactly,
Yeah,
I was going to
exactly.
say,
Yeah.
there's a massive amount of craft and technical knowledge in any painting that you might see, right? Like, and so I don't understand really this division
Mhm,
between what is craft and what is
Right.
fine art,
Yeah.
because both require a specific kind of knowledge, and they both sort of rely on elements of design, right, that make them aesthetically pleasing or make them.
And it's made by an artist. It's made
It's
by
made by an artist, and I mean, a painting serves a function just like anything else that would find itself in the craft bin, right? Like a painting has a function, a sculpture has a function, it just may not be the kind of everyday use function. But then again, I don't know if that's true, because you might go and, you know, say you're like devotional to a sculpture, right? A religious statue. So that has a function that you're using every day, just like you might a basket. I think the fiber component, the qualifier, and that's why I don't really like to say I'm a fiber artist first, just as much as I'm sort of removing myself from I'm a sculptor, like, because I work also with many different types of material and many different ways. Like it's, you know, I like, what is the necessary need for, what is this need for a qualifier, right? Why can I just not be an artist first and I happen to use fibers? It's, you know, I think part of it is it's perpetuated by like a gallery institution system where, oh, we want this and we want this, and it's nice to program around labels, right? Because then you can get interested parties to come for those specific reasons versus, oh, we want, you know, artists with this, you know, particular theme or something, or we want to address this topic, but it can be, you know, understood in any type of material. So like I, for example, when, you know, like, do I have to say I'm like an artist of color or something, or a queer artist first, because that's going to mean something beyond what I just do with the work, like it's there already. So, you know, and I know those have varying, let's say, levels of importance to people regarding identity, like, but again, like, I'm not gonna pigeonhole myself into this place, and I wonder if that's part of it too. It's like, can we just cut off the qualifier and just have this exist as art and craft and everything else that requires it to exist, right? Yeah, I feel like go for it.
I was gonna say kind of something similar, getting back to your comment. Part of me, just to play devil's advocate, was gonna say, are we doing it to ourselves? By having these shows that are like textile shows, and, you know, like, are we separating ourselves, you know, from just making
Yeah, I think that, like, also going back to that point is that textile work has been so linked to function and like domesticity too, that it's just such a common material that it is hard for some people to take it out of that context. Like you see a painting and it's like, whoa, that's a painting, you know, like I don't have paint around my house, but I have clothes around my house, and that's just a common thing. So I think that's why we have to keep defending it. And I feel like even like it's like institutions, schools and all of that are still giving me readings that are like, why fiber art is not craft, or why, we have to fight the battle to consider craft as art. I feel like that's also giving into that need to defend it. So yeah.
I have a question for you about art basel, which is also this question. So you both use the word common for fiber art, and it's like, ubiquitous, and the reason we're all attracted to it is because of its, link to our culture, our families, our everyday lives, and so a kind of competing idea why we would need to defend it would be, you can't sell your everyday life. Nobody wants to pay $20,000 for common. So when you go to Art Basel, are you seeing work that's very different? Are you seeing work that's talked about in a very different way? Because to me, there's the work that we love to make, the work that we love to talk about, the work that people love to see and write books about. And then there's also work that sells for a lot of money. And those have an overlap, but they're not necessarily the same work. So when you were talking about do we have to keep defending it? It's because my work is worth 1/10 of someone else's. That's why I have to keep defending it. So I'm kind of wondering if when you see it over at Art Basel, is there anything, that might have been a question or a statement.
No, when art fairs, the art fair environment doesn't care about this. Nobody cares. Nobody talks about art, craft. Nobody cares. It's beyond. They're in a completely different level. They're past that. It's all about I don't like it. I want to buy. I don't want to buy it. It doesn't matter. And there was a lot of fiber art, and a lot of fiber art sold, and that includes sculpture. A lot of soft sculpture. Do you consider that soft sculpture?
Sure.
There was a lot of installations that museum purchased it, and even individuals purchased, because they loved. There was this artist who had a show at Praise Shadows. She does the portraits. Jennifer, forgot her name. Her work sold the first hour. Her work sold, just like this work here behind you, portraits with needle felt. So we are the ones reflecting about that. Maybe galleries are reflecting about that, but not commercial galleries. It doesn't matter. We are makers, we are the behind the scenes, we are the ones who support the artists, in my case. So we want to see you thriving, and we want to make sure that you are confident and you have the structure to continue to make. Because making fiber art, dealing with fiber art, it's complicated. It requires a lot of structure. And it's difficult, and it's uncertain, because it's difficult to manipulate, it's difficult to hang, to place, to find a spot for it, right? Hanging this show was a challenge, because what do we do? Is this a hanging piece? Is this a wall piece? Is this a flat piece? It requires that thought process, and it's complicated. So that's why I think there is always a conversation about, is this a decorative piece or is a contemporary functional piece? And I don't mind having those discussions. I think it's great, and it keeps fiber art out there. And I think that's the thing about craft and fiber art. It's always we're always poking. It's always asking people to consider and to think about it.
I just also want to say, in relationship to your comment, I don't disagree with it. I like to think we were past it. But when you think about how this whole symposium came about, if we were past it, we wouldn't have to have a symposium about fiber art in the greater Boston area with the Fuller Craft Museum and the Peabody Essex Museum and some other I don't know, the LA
dance
school and other areas that, we wouldn't need to have a specific fiber arts symposium necessarily, but we do. And it is bringing it back out into the world or further out into the world so that people get used to seeing it. So maybe in another 20 years, it won't matter.
I will say, I worked at Fuller for a while, I think Beth in particular is particularly fond of collecting fiber.
Oh, yes.
So in that particular case, you are gonna find fiber art mixed in with, it's a craft museum. So there's a whole craft argument again, but I would argue the same thing about craft as I just argued about fibers. It's ubiquitous, it's everywhere, and that's probably why it has to be defended, but I do believe craft is art, and art is craft. But I think that's where the difference is gonna be, as it becomes part of collections and shows that aren't specific, and there have been a few.
Right.
Yeah.
Where you find, and that's when it's gonna start, and I think it's gonna be a very slow evolution.
But the Fuller really when they moved, they were a general art museum, and they made the decision to move in the direction that they have gone. And that was a huge decision on that part, and very supportive of the crafts. And I don't mean just, the crafts, but the art and craft, and showing both sides of all the processes that it does show. And they blend, they have wonderful shows and are supportive of this consortium, this symposium that's happening. Yeah.
But I see museums in general. Even the Met Gala, it's all about fiber and textile, right? And it's a big fundraiser, and they do help the fashion and design department. But even museums all over the world, they are emphasizing a lot more their textile and their own culture, depending on the country. So I think I think we don't have to question if it's here to stay. I don't think it ever went anywhere. I think it's always been here, and it will continue to be here.
I will say that, like, with institutions that are much like museums that are much larger, I feel like they could sometimes become black holes and just, never show work for 40 years. Like at the MFA Boston, there was a Joan Snyder painting and the Tender Loving Care. I don't know if anyone went to it, but she hadn't seen that painting in 40 years because it was in storage for 40 years when the museum acquired it. And so I guess something that I'm struggling with is to how can museums rotate their exhibitions more and showcase everything that they've had in storage for however many years. But yeah, that's
I will say I sometimes felt like that at Fuller has a lot in its collection, and there were times they'd be like, textiles unfortunately can't stay up for too long.
Yeah.
exactly.
So that's the other problem with it, and there was an incident there, and one had to get sent away to get clean. It's at higher risk. I think when there's certain elements. So there's that too. But
I've been having worked in museums in Paris for a while, and the issue of sensitivity of works, I don't think it can be argued that fiber is more sensitive than drawings or prints. And a lot of other things. And the problem of basements full of art that you can't afford to circulate to the museum because it costs a lot to take it out of storage, change the wall, paint the wall, put it up. It sounds crazy, but if you've got a large museum and you're trying to do that on a regular basis, and you're trying to survive with general operating costs, it's a challenge to keep it circulating.
And then you have acquisitions. So what do? You have pieces in storage that has never been shown and could be seen. And then you have the acquisition. So you're acquiring more work, but you're not showing pieces that are in storage. So how do museums balance this?
work the traveling shows into
It's stored in perpetuity for traveling shows and malls.
Mhm.
And that's a great service.
I think the Tender Love and Care show was, I liked it because there was a variety in there. Like, I think I had approached it with like, oh, this is a fibers heavy show. Like, I'll go with my friend who's also in the fibers department at Mass Art. And it's like, oh no, they've interspersed it with all of these other types of work. And I wonder if that is a means to like, all right, let's get past this discussion about like, fiber art, craft, and let's base something around this really strong concept about, how do you show love, how do you show tenderness, like how, whether it's with the work itself or is it, representational of how people, show love and care with one another or other things. So I think that maybe that's a means for, let's say, a museum, for example, that has the amount of work and the variety to, again, just really create the programming that can best serve all of these types of work. And if anything, it just strengthens, again, the interrelated nature of these types of work that, span a number of years, right? And means of making styles. So yeah, maybe it's the programming. And just like to add, I think that this symposium, the Gather Symposium, it could very well be just, also for the people who work with fibers who enjoy it too. Like there is I think a unique way in which we all can appreciate the materiality and the scope of methods, because there are so many possibilities that, if you're working with fibers primarily, you have just, again, like a love for the craft of it, or, the material. There's so much to see in these like shows, and you can like, oh my gosh, I never thought of using it this way. Like, I want to try this now, So I think there's also just an appreciation for the skill and kind of like the genius that is on display here and throughout the cities. Like, plus you get all of the context too, like how are people finding their way into this and what are they thinking about? Like, again, because it's so broad, you get like just, all of these points of view that I think as an artist to be curious again is so important, so that you can keep making the work and to keep learning, whether it be about the train lines, right, or whether it be about the strength of certain of fibers or what have you. So
Yeah, I know when I come to these shows, no matter what show it is, I always walk away thinking, wow, I never thought of that. That's amazing. I want to go back now and try that. Or the flip side of that is, if I have a piece of work in a show and I'm talking to somebody about that, they look at my work in an entirely different way. And I'm like, wow, I never thought of that. And that's really interesting. And maybe I can take that and run with it. That's one thing. But the other thing I want to say as we sit here is, you want to know why we're talking about fiber work? This is the multi-generation right here.
Oh my God.
Here's the person who's just graduating from school, and I'm at the other end, and they're in the middle. So fiber work, it's going to continue. The legacy is out there. People will always be using fiber work, which I think for me, is really uplifting. And the one plug I'm going to put for my work, which is I have like 3 totally different bodies of work in that room. But the piece that I'm very proud of at the moment is shower thoughts, which are thoughts that my 14-year-old granddaughter has when she is in the shower. And they're very philosophical. And she told them to me, and I asked her if I could use them in my art, and she said yes. So I embroidered them on my grandmother's textiles. So my granddaughter is on my grandmother's textiles. And to me, that says it. I mean, that's the legacy. That's, you know, I just think that talks about what fiber work is.
Yeah, and even like the legacy, I think will continue due to the common material of what we were saying. So.
Yeah, there is so many stories. I mean, in this show, we have stories about someone suffering from migraines and talking about the health system that totally neglects her pain. We have memories, family memories entangled in real pictures and real belongings. We have incarcerated women's issues. We have a rock climber who doesn't want to let go of the discarded ropes. We have personal stories like Mia. We have rocks from her hometown in Iran and her own hair. We have here also political work. So from graffiti from a place in Norway. So it is like a traveling around the world of sensations and stories and heritage and even territories
And
here.
Vietnam, with work from.
Exactly. I was going to ask you to talk about your work, actually. Do you want to say some things about your work?
Actually, like I've been here 23 years
Yeah.
ago, like and was students. So I used to do like in fashion in Vietnam, and
That's her piece,
Yeah.
the red and blue.
and my family had the gallery. So my father has the gallery. So most of the things that I used to see is the paintings and all the stuff. And then against that idea to become an artist, be a painter, like I jumped into fashion and all the new things like computer, graphic design. And then I got a chance to went to Boston and studied in Master. And they sent me to the program like really basic about fashion design, you know, really basic. And I want to see more because it's a big school. So I go down to the department and okay, give me the list of the class, all the class and department that I can join to this time. And I saw fiber there, which is interesting because it's like something like linked with my background, my fashion world in Vietnam. So it brought me a different view about how to using fiber, not like making things, but like you can use that to create something in different way. And for that, my artwork over there, so I combine like paintings and fiber, 3D form or whatever, you know, we have in my background to use that to express my experience, use my hand and my knowledge to play with that. So it's brought a lot of choice and experience, good experience. And I'm happy to have my work here, you know, for the first time.
I think the hands-on, I'm not an artist, but the hands-on aspect,
Yeah.
right, because not everyone digs in, right? I know a lot of people who would never be able to touch clay or the texture, you know, something that bothers them. So I think that you guys have something special with the connectivity with material.
Yesterday we had the dinner with the other artists and we talked about the 3D printer, like to do art. So I again said, okay, it's a good idea, but I like to have my hand feeling of the real thing. So if you just use the idea, you create things and you put each other and something and you bring it out. So it's great, but you don't have the feeling when you have your emotion when you work on things. So I think it's a totally different story if you.
Yeah, the 3D printing is a topic. AI is a topic.
Yeah.
Images, manipulated images on Procreate or, you know, creating textures on the computer is another topic that for a next conversation. Very interesting how people still look at a still life, for example, and then when they see the texture and everyone like, oh my God, look at the texture, look at the fur, look at the, right, look at the lace. So there is something there also that people feel shocked by the talent again of the maker, the artist. Well, any other questions? So we can wrap up.
I have a comment. So my name's Danielle, and I'm from Rhode Island, from a small art center. And I work with a lot of youth. Like we have kids art camps, and we are hosting a fiber exhibit this summer, and we're trying to introduce kids to this. And as I walk around and look at this, I'm wondering if you're the last generation that has learned from your elders. You know, you referenced this. You referenced how your mom had discarded fabrics, and I'm looking at things and seeing just spectacular craftsmanship with fine motor skill and stitching and how to create a painting through fiber. And I'm putting out a question at the end of the program, sorry, but but it makes me think about, you know, the youth. I'm talking about like 8 to 14-year-old kids, you know, that, like you said, like, do they know what fur and
I don't think so. I think as long as there are people to teach it,
yeah.
and there are children in their lives, there is going to be somebody who's going to have an interest in ask. My grandmother had 15 grandchildren, and I mean, I wouldn't call her a fiber artist, but she sewed, and she had all kinds of stuff. My other grandmother had 5. She sewed costumes, she did millinery, she did this. I'm the only one, but I am one that did, that it took 2, and I have an aunt that's very, my niece is already expressing an interest in it, and I don't have my parents have an interest. I think if this is going on, there's gonna be interest, and they're gonna
So
know
you
something
think
they can learn from.
So it's bringing awareness, maybe that will.
But it does have those consequences. I mean, so I have 3 girls, and they were not happy because I fixed all their clothes that they had home. Like, no, you pay a fortune for it, these kind of special things, that's all I did for free, right? You know, I made them very special. And now they love what I did, right? And they do also all kinds of hand things. Because I never had time when they were young except for fixing things, because I was working in a different job and very busy and sort of day and night. But now they come and say, can you show us this? Can you see, I know they are, fabulous with textile, in addition to they're always done art, the whole family, we've always done art, but now they sort of really grip and start to be a little more explorative, experimental, not just follow what you're supposed to do. But
Well, I think now with the new administration, we're gonna have to start making our own clothes, so yeah, we better learn.
Yes, and I think, I thank you, because that's heartening to hear. But your diverse people, like your focus is on that, so your people around you are gonna consider that, admire what you do. I'm talking about like mainstream kids that they don't want to paint, they don't want, you know, in school. Sorry.
I mean, I think fiber art gives into accessibility, as we've been talking about, and like, I actually didn't learn how to crochet from my grandmothers, even though I was surrounded by it. I learned on my own during COVID.
Yeah.
So I think like accessibility to the internet and like YouTube and whatever is like what will, if it's not taught by the grandparents, then it will be self-taught, and that's how it's gonna keep like snowballing in a way, so.
I think the wearable fiber art textile is another issue because it's expensive. And that, although a lot of people appreciate the uniqueness of it, it is expensive. So how can we, at the same time that we're making a case for affordability and for wearing natural elements and support the artist and the uniqueness of it, it is expensive. So that is another factor. How can we make this economy more affordable?
And one more, goodwill.
good with
Okay,
it.
I guess cashmere, silk, linen, I mean, I get the most astounding.
Yeah, but I wanna buy your clothes, I wanna buy
Yeah, and
that
then
vest, I wanna
Yeah,
buy
yeah,
that
upcycle.
scarf
You can
that
upcycle
you
it,
made.
change it.
I did not say this, but now you know.
And you know, I do sell scarves here at the gift shop, and it is, you know, it's like 165, 145. How many people can afford?
Well, I mean, on the other side of that coin, those probably took a very long time.
Oh,
to make.
trust
And
me.
so actually,
You don't
it's
have to
almost-
convince me.
No, I
Yeah,
know, but
yeah.
it's more that fast fashion and that type, sweatshops and whatnot have
Yeah.
actually, I mean, have cost.
Oh, yeah, and when people buy mugs or whatever, wearable, they are the happiest people on earth. I witnessed that. They are proud of the acquisition. But I wish we could make that more
Common.
common for everyone. And that's, as an arts administrator, that's what I keep thinking, you know. What is the process? What is the system? What's missing in the system that we can make that possible?
I think everyone needs to go back to just having like one pair of
That's
awesome
what I was
shoes.
just- Oh, yes.
Like-
When, if we limit our
Choose wisely.
need for so much, and then we like cherish the things that we have that are also potentially made better so they last longer, or we can fix them without it, you know,
Mhm.
causing issue. I think that could make sense for the cost, right? So like you have something, you cherish it, then the cost makes sense. It lasts longer, the cost makes sense. But when you have like the choice to have something that's cheap, both in cost and in like material, it makes that more expensive thing that may, you know, be cherished essentially, or it loses its ability to be cherished. If you have something that looks like that, but it, you know.
Oh, well, we can continue the conversation. We can hang out here for a little bit. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So
Thank you for
inspiring.
doing this.
I love this. As I said, it's my favorite thing on earth to do sip and chat and to have this conversation and to be with all of you. Thank you, everyone who attended virtually. That was a fun experience. And it worked. So we.
I need to show you.
Yeah,
Look at this, I love this. It needs to be.
I'm hoping it makes sense. I've been like thinking about